Okay, let's unpack this. What if the most decisive factor in a new organization's long-term health isn't, the size of its first budget
Yeah.
or the quality of its website or even how charismatic the founder is?
Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive, right?
Totally. The sources we dove into this week reveal this surprising paradox. Success is actually determined by the small, fragile decisions made during its very first year.
That's right. Right. We are deep diving into what the materials call the young plant moment, or YPM. This is that initial season, typically defined as a short, decisive 6 to 18 months.
Just 6 to 18 months, that's it.
That's the critical window. It's when the foundational DNA, the core habits, the whole culture gets permanently encoded. It's a stage, brimming with possibility, but also perilously vulnerable, like a sapling in a harsh field.
And what makes this moment so urgent now is the changing landscape. The old model, the idea that if you simply, I don't know, launch a service, people will just show up and commit. Well, that's kind of gone, isn't it?
Precisely. Yeah,
Yeah.
they'll build it and they will come, thinking. It just doesn't hold up anymore. The external climate has grown way more complex. We're talking secularization, indifference, sometimes even outright hostility.
So fragile beginnings, they just won't cut it.
They simply won't survive this environment. It means leaders can't just coast on enthusiasm anymore. If you want resilience, if you want multiplication, you absolutely must take the intentional work of the YPM seriously.
Okay. So, our mission today is straightforward then. We're extracting the core frameworks, the practical anatomy, and I guess the non-negotiable practices leaders have to implement during this young plant moment.
Right. The goal is to ensure their endeavor grows deep roots, rather than becoming some short-lived spectacle that just withers by year 3.
Let's jump into the metaphor the sources use to guide all this thinking. It's quite vivid. So, the sources ground their entire framework in this idea of gardening horticulture. They argue the core issue during the YPM isn't just measuring activity, like how many people show up, it's setting the DNA of the plant. But here's the danger they point out. Early vibrancy can be a dangerous illusion, like bright green shoots hiding brittle roots underneath. Why is that illusion so common?
Well, it's because early success often rests entirely on two factors that kind of mask fragility: founder charisma and launch funding.
Okay. The initial buzz.
Right. That initial buzz creates high attendance, loads of emotional energy. But, and this is the key, if that energy isn't channeled immediately into intentional formation, those people are basically consumers, not co-owners.
And they just scatter.
They scatter the moment the novelty wears off, or maybe the founder takes a holiday. The roots aren't there to hold them.
So what does a brittle root system actually look like in, say, month 12?
Okay, picture this. It looks like high attendance, but zero accountability. People show up for the main event, the big gathering, but they have no established relationships for dealing with conflict or, real spiritual growth.
So the roots, the discipleship, the doctrine, those covenant relationships, they're just too shallow.
Way too shallow. They can't anchor the community when the inevitable storm hits, and a storm always hits.
The sources really emphasize that intentional stewardship is the non-negotiable human role here. They anchor this in Paul's famous division of labor.
Yes. Paul separates the labor in 1 Corinthians. I planted, Apollos watered, God gave the growth.
Yeah.
But wait, isn't that quote often used to justify kind of a hands-off, passive leadership style?
Exactly. The idea that since God gives the growth, we just need to show up and hope for the best.
Yeah.
Well, the sources push back on that interpretation hard. They insist that intentional human stewardship, that work of planting and watering, is a necessary partner to divine sovereignty.
So we don't control the outcome, obviously.
No, but we are fully responsible for the quality of the cultivation during that fragile YPM. Passive leadership leads straight to brittle roots. Active, methodical care, on the other hand, leads to resilience.
And this intentionality, it connects to the long-term vision, doesn't it? The prophetic goal isn't just quick sprouts. We're planting for permanence, for strength that endures trials for generations. They talk about planting oaks of righteousness, not annual flowers. That long-term imagination has to shape the decisions you make in, like, month 8, not just year 8.
Okay, so if we agree the quality of the roots is critical, how do we actually build them? Let's stick with the metaphor and break down the anatomy of what a healthy sapling needs structurally. The sources detail 7 interrelated systems, like a living organism.
Yeah, this systemic view is fascinating because it shows how neglect in one area basically stars the others. Let's start with the genetics. The seed.
The seed, okay.
This is the vision and gospel integrity, the organization's genetic code, if you will. It must be a clear, biblical gospel and mission, articulated so simply that everyone on the core team can recite it and understand their role in it. If the seed is fuzzy, the growth will be, well, malformed.
Makes sense. Next up is the soil. That's the relational, cultural, and theological ground. The environment itself.
Exactly. Rich soil includes things like hospitality, transparency, grace. Toxic soil. Conversely, you'll see gossip, leader dependence, or what's in materials called program first thinking.
Hold on. What specifically does program first mean in a young, volatile organization like this?
Good question. That's when you prioritize the event calendar, the big launch party, the special services, the outreach event, over the messy, slow work of one-on-one discipleship and building authentic relational health.
So it feels productive.
Feels super productive, lots of activity. But it starves the actual plant of nutrients. It starves the roots.
Got it. And the roots themselves, that's the anchor you mentioned.
The roots, yeah. Formed through sustained teaching, spiritual practices, things like prayer or Sabbath observance, and crucially, covenant relationships. They provide the depth needed to anchor the community through trials. They're absolutely non-negotiable.
Then the visible signs of health are the shootin' leaves. That's the worship gatherings, the small groups, the community life we see.
Right. But crucially, that visible life must flow from the root health. If your leaves look massive and green, but your roots are tiny and shallow.
You've basically cultivated a spectacle.
Exactly, a spectacle that will collapse in the first drought or storm.
Now, who's guiding all this? The gardeners,
Yeah.
or the stem? This is leadership and structures.
The gardener sets the pace, the cadence. Healthy early governance, things like clear roles, real accountability, a defined leadership pipeline acts as the trellis that channels life upwards and prevents single-point failure.
That single point of failure seems like a big risk.
It's huge.
Yeah.
If the entire operation relies on the energy and charisma of just one person, your stem is fundamentally too weak. It's going to snap.
Okay. We also need watering and pruning.
Yeah, this is the patient spiritual feeding through teaching and also timely correction. That's the pruning part. And pruning must always be directed by love for the sake of greater fruitfulness. You have to be willing to cut back non-essentials, especially in the YPM. Saying no is pruning.
And finally, the external climate. The neighborhood, the culture, the socioeconomic factors. So if I'm planting in, say, a rapidly gentrifying urban area versus a stable rural town, how does that external climate fundamentally change my YPM strategy?
It forces different pruning choices, different watering schedules. In the urban context, the climate might demand hyper-flexible scheduling, maybe rapid mobilization to meet immediate social needs. You have to be nimble.
Whereas in the stable rural area.
The climate might demand incredible long-term patience, a focus on intergenerational connections, slow, trusted relationship building over years, not months. The gardener must adapt their methods while fiercely preserving that core seed DNA. You don't change the gospel, but you change how you water and prune.
Okay, we've seen the blueprint for health, but what about the checklist? If I'm in my YPM, maybe I feel like I've got 6 months left in that window. What are the non-negotiable tools I absolutely need in my shed? Because the sources are clear. Ignore the stage, and you risk irrelevance.
Absolutely. These structural and relational must-haves are the key to encoding that healthy DNA early on. Let's run through them. Number one, gospel clarity. This is just foundational. You need a one-line mission statement, maybe 2 lines, that everyone on the core team can recite from memory and apply instantly. This ensures the C is the right one from the get-go.
Simple enough. Number 2, covenantal core. Okay, you need a written document defining commitments. Is this just a fancy mission statement, though? What does a covenant actually entail that a simple mission statement doesn't?
Great question. A mission statement defines what you do. A covenant defines how you relate to each other, especially when things get hard. It sets clear commitments to things like prayer, financial support, and critically conflict resolution.
So it anticipates the friction.
Exactly. This document creates the relational soil before the inevitable first disagreement happens. It gives you a shared language and process, preventing those early fractures that can kill a young plant.
Third, and this sounds crucial for root depth, mandatory discipleship pathways.
Mandatory. Every single new believer or committed member must enter a relational discipling environment like a small group, a cohort, a mentor relationship within, say, 90 days. Formation is not an optional add-on.
So if someone loves the Sunday gathering but consistently refuses to engage deeper,
They are basically signaling they aren't ready to be part of the core structure during this fragile YPM phase. It sounds tough, but protecting the core is paramount early on. Fourth, apprenticeship pipeline. You have to intentionally select and train maybe 3 to 8 emerging leaders right from the start. This isn't just about efficiency later, it's about leadership redundancy now. Aim for at least 2 trained people for every essential role. No single points of failure.
Fifth, external accountability.
Right.
Why is securing an advisory elder or maybe a sponsoring pastor from another church early on so vital? Is it just a nice checkbox, or is it genuinely a critical guardrail?
Oh, it's a critical guardrail. It protects against isolation, which is arguably the #1 killer of leaders and movements in the YPM.
Why isolation specifically?
Because when a leader operates alone in that high-stress 6 to 18-month window, they're incredibly susceptible to making panic decisions, maybe drifting from the original vision or just burning out. External accountability forces them to slow down, get perspective, and prevents the leader from becoming the single point of failure.
Right. Okay, and finally, number 6, financial transparency. This seems like standard good management, but why is it non-negotiable specifically in the volatile YPM?
Transparency isn't just about ethics here. In the YPM, resources are almost always tight, and tension around money is high. Transparency prevents that inevitable early tension like, hey, we need more funding, or where did last month's offering go, from festering into mistrust that poisons the soil and kills the plant.
So simple budgets, predictable giving patterns.
Exactly. And a clear, communicated path toward covering basic costs within, say, 12 to 24 months. It builds trust in the stem, in the leadership.
Okay, leaders need to know the warning signs too. Let's look at the 3 most common failure modes the sources highlight. Where does this typically go wrong?
Good idea. First, and maybe the most common, is leader-centric reliance. The symptom is painfully clear. Everything, from the Sunday service to communication to fixing the leaky faucet, collapses if the main planter is sick or away for a week.
Because everything flows through them.
Right. The fix is obvious but hard. Develop multiple leaders early, cross-train relentlessly. The lead planter needs to become a curator and cultivator of other leaders, not the central performer doing everything.
Second failure mode, spectacle over formation.
Yeah, we saw this happen with a group we tracked. They had like 200 people at the big launch party, fantastic music, decent funding, looked amazing.
Sounds like success.
Looked like it. But then the coffee machine broke one week, and the charismatic leader was on holiday the next, and suddenly 70% of those initial attendees just weren't there anymore.
Wow.
The attraction was strong, but the glue, the relational depth, the actual discipleship, was weak. The fix is intentionally rebalancing resources, time, money, energy, away from just the big event and towards sustained discipleship, like those small groups and mentorship structures we talked about.
And the third failure mode, poor conflict systems.
Or often, no conflict system.
Yeah.
The first real disputes, and believe me, they will come, over music style or budget or whatever, they completely fracture the community because there's no agreed-upon process for resolution. People just get angry and leave.
So the remedy.
Teach biblical conflict resolution principles proactively. Use the language from that covenant you established back in month 3. If you don't teach people how to fight well, biblically, they will simply fight dirty or just walk away.
This really reframes success metrics, doesn't it? It means if I'm just tracking Sunday attendance, I'm basically using vanity metrics. Why should I care if my attendance is high, but my integration rate, the number getting into discipleship, is only like 10%?
You should care deeply, because that integration rate reveals the true depth of your roots. If 90% of your people are only attending the big show, they are incredibly high churn risks. They're consumers.
And they'll likely be gone soon.
You will find, almost guaranteed, that most of those 90% will be gone by year 3. It proves your roots were too shallow to actually hold them when life happened, or the novelty wore off. So you need to track depth metrics instead. Track apprenticeship conversion, how many trainees actually step up and start leading a ministry. Track service embeddedness, how many sustained community partnerships is the group actually involved in. These metrics reveal if the DNA is truly multiplying, not just expanding its visible surface area. #TextJago outro.
So the young plant moment really demands this incredibly difficult paradox, doesn't it? On one hand, urgency, you have to act decisively to protect the shoot and set those crucial structures early. But on the other hand, patience, you have to resist that powerful temptation to accelerate visible growth on roots that aren't ready, on ungrafted roots. That tension seems to be the core takeaway.
It really is. Yeah. And if we connect this to the bigger generational picture, history is just filled with examples that prove this method works. Look at movements that became global forces, like, say, John Wesley's Methodists. They became influential not because they had massive launch services initially. No, it was because their early roots ran incredibly deep. They prioritized the methodical, small, almost tedious commitment of the class meeting first, way before they focused on massive revival gatherings. That deep formation fueled the expansion.
So ignoring formation for attraction.
If you ignore formation for the sake of attraction, you risk cultivating something that looks impressive now but is fundamentally fragile and won't last. You'll wither.
That is the ultimate question for you listening today, isn't it? Are you building a structure that can actually support an oak tree, or are you just celebrating the quick, flashy sprout? What will you do this week? Just one thing to implement one of these depth metrics or structural guardrails. How will you ensure your efforts yield lasting oaks of righteousness instead of quick, brittle growth that fades away? Maybe it's time to audit your soil right now.